When I coach boxing, one of the first concepts I explain to students is positioning. Positioning is not optional in boxing. A boxer has to learn it, respect it, and manage it constantly. From bell to bell, from pillar to post, positioning is paramount in succeeding in boxing. Positioning in boxing often determines whether a boxer can hit an opponent or whether that opponent can hit them back. Boxing is, after all, about hitting, but also about not getting hit. Positioning in the ring, or what's often referred to as ring generalship, demonstrates a certain level of craft when it comes to boxing. It's this craft that often determines who wins and who loses because, all things being equal, knowing where to be or how to get there is often half the battle in a boxing ring. Life isn't much different. The idea of generalship in this context can be equated to being in command and control of the situation or the environment or both. And one of the best ways to demonstrate this type of command and control is by being in the right place at the right time. And that brings us back to positioning in boxing. Here's how I break it down. You can either be in position, in transition, or out of position. Those are a boxer's options, whether they know it or not, only, always. And each option nets a different result depending on what happens to the boxer when they're in it. The obvious example is getting punched, right? If a boxer is in position and gets punched, not ideal, but not the worst thing either. Being in position makes a boxer more resistant to the problem of getting hit. Being in transition and getting hit, not great, because whatever the boxer was trying to accomplish probably fell apart at that moment. But getting hit in transition isn't always that big a problem if the boxer can get back in position immediately after. It doesn't have to be the old position, but it does need to be secure. That's what in position means. Not necessarily safe, but secure. And in the absence of safety, security is the next best thing. That's what being in position offers in the ring. Being in transition doesn't immediately erode that security, but it can compromise it. Or it can be exploited by the type of person looking for an opportunity to do so. You know, like an opponent in a boxing ring might want to. Or a person in your day-to-day living who doesn't always have your best interests in mind when they make a decision. Just like in the ring, life is better if you're not at risk of being exploited or forced to constantly adjust to being out of position. Once you see how a person, even yourself, is always in one of these three states, it gets easier to make decisions about what you want to do to serve you best. A person who's living life right is in position. When things go wrong, as they often do, at least there's the stability of being in the right place at the right time. There's security in being in position when things go wrong. Less so when one is in transition. That can derail an entire life. Ideally, the person can get back in position, whatever that looks like post-transition, but that can be a struggle to be sure. But getting caught out of position, that's the worst of all the inflection points. In boxing and life, a person out of position just isn't going to have the resilience to manage whatever is going wrong at that moment. Too many moving parts are always a problem when a person is trying to sort themselves out. Being able to determine what's urgent but not important from what's urgent but actually important becomes an almost impossible task to complete when everything is urgently drawing your attention. That's the downward spiral that happens when a person is in the wrong place at the wrong time. So do your best to identify whether you're in position, in transition, or out of position. And if you're out of position, make a transition to get into position as fast as you can. Because time out of position has an opportunity cost that most people can't afford. Sometimes you realize it as you're losing it. Other times you realize long after another person has extracted that cost. Life, like boxing, has a way of making sure you know you made a mistake by the consequences that arise as a result. And just as positioning in boxing isn't optional, consequences from being out of position when a boxer should have been in transition or in position aren't optional either. But the problem with boxers in a ring and people living their lives is that learning from those consequences often is optional. And not learning from a negative outcome all but guarantees being out of position again and again and again until the round ends, or life does.